5.
Excellent. Well, good morning and or afternoon, as the case might be, and welcome to our next episode of Conversations with Tech Leaders Shaping the Future of Canada. My name is Dalibor Petrovic. I'm a partner at Deloitte, and I lead our CIO Tech Leadership Program in Canada, and I have a delightful role to host these conversations alongside my friends at the CIO Strategy Council and Deloitte Canada. This morning, I am really delighted to welcome Catherine Luelo. Catherine is the Senior Vice President and CIO of Air Canada, our national airline. I am very much looking forward to this conversation, Catherine. We have prepared a couple of questions, and for those of you who are joining us or have been joining us in our previous sessions, you would know that over the next 45 minutes, we're going to have a dialogue, a couple of questions that I would typically ask our guests, and then we're going to reserve the final 10-15 minutes for audience questions, which I would encourage you to submit using the Q&A function of the Zoom platform. So with that, Catherine, thank you so much for giving us your time. I can only imagine how interesting these times are and how much pressure you have on your time. So thank you very much on behalf of both Deloitte and CIO Strategy Council, and of course, all of our audience members dialing in. Catherine, the first question that we wanted to ask you is to perhaps just introduce yourself to us and tell us a little bit about your personal story. How have you navigated your life and your career to end up in the role that you're in now?
All right, well, hello, bonjour from Montreal. The head office of Air Canada is a Quebec-based head office, and I'm really pleased to be joining you today. And thank you to Deloitte for the invitation. You're a very important partner of Air Canada's and to the CIO Strategy Council. It's an interesting time to be a CIO right now, for sure, and we can talk about that a little bit as we get into the conversation today. My personal story, there was a number of years ago. I moved from Montreal to Montreal from Calgary about 4 years ago. And I was at a Women's Day event at the Petroleum Club, which is in and of itself very unique. For those of you that are Albertans, you know that until a few years ago, women weren't even welcome at the Petroleum Club in Calgary. That's changed over time, gratefully. And there was a International Women's Day event that I was speaking at. And one of the exercises was around to draw sort of a picture of our life story and put it up and kind of talk a little bit about what got us to where we are. And there was a very sort of a prescriptive activity we were asked to do. And I sort of put that aside, flipped the page over, got out some of my kids' colored markers and did squiggly lines all over the place. And that's probably a really good place to start with the story is I did not sort of wake up and say, hey, I want to be a CIO. In fact, I went to university with the hopes that I would go in to medicine. I very much wanted to be a doctor. Now, gratefully for my parents, one of my sisters managed to get through that track. So we have both a physician and a teacher in our family, and I'm the third underachiever of 3 girls. And I determined that going to the pub was more interesting than going to school. And so finished my sciences degree, got into actually a sales environment, rolled into working for in TELUS and started to do some technology work and thought, oh my gosh, I love this. And I fell in love with technology. And what I fell in love with was it was this perfect combination in my mind of art and science coming together. You need to use both sides of your brain to be effective as a technology leader. And my career has taken me through working in telecom, doing mergers and acquisitions in that space, working in non-tech roles, tech roles, working at WestJet a great Alberta company that I got to do things that I was not qualified to do. It really stretched and bent my skill set. And that is a part of my career that I'm very affectionate about. And that was in the early startup days of WestJet. I left there and took a year and basically stepped back. The three letters that I'm most proud of behind my name are not BSC or CIO, they are MOM. And the fact that I am a mom to two kids and have largely raised them on my own since they were fairly young, that was not easy. And so I decided to take a year and put my BlackBerry down, so that dates me a little bit, and pay attention to their sports, be the mom that cut things out in the construction room, and really enjoyed that. Then kind of went into oil and gas in a very junior role. I knew nothing about that industry. And a couple of years later, I became the CIO of Enbridge, which was my executive finishing school. Honestly, it was a really excellent opportunity. And I got the pleasure to work for an individual who mentored and shaped and invested in me in a huge, huge way, and has really framed a large part of the leader I've become today. Then the industry came a knock-in for a CIO role, of which I swore I'd never go back into aviation and swore I would never do another reservation system. And that was the job I took in Montreal. So I picked up and moved my 16-year-old halfway across the country to a predominantly French-speaking province to take on the mandate at Air Canada, and have never looked back. I wished everybody had had the opportunity growing up that I did. And my parents are actually on the call today listening in, and they would tell you that I was less gracious about this growing up. But I've lived in the Maritimes, I've lived in Alberta, I've lived in Ontario, and now have the privilege of being a very proud Quebecer. And that has really framed my point of view on being a proud Canadian. So that's probably more about me than you wanted to know, but there's a little bit of backstory.
Catherine, what a wonderful story, and clearly a number of very, very bold moves. So, so very, very interesting and very wonderful to actually hear you talk and tell us that story. So now you are at Air Canada. Of course, the last year has been like no year prior, I'm sure. I'm really interested to learn what are your perspectives on Air Canada's tech and digital ambitions, strategies? What are the challenges that you're dealing with now? And perhaps are there some opportunities here as well?
Yeah, I mean, we're doing things in the industry right now that I think, A, we wouldn't have moved as quick, and B, the collaboration wouldn't have been possible. But if you'd allow me, I wouldn't mind just level setting with our audience today. I speak often externally, and I'm not sure your average person really understands the impact that COVID has had to the aviation space. So let me just share a couple of quick numbers, and then I'll segue into what we're doing from a digital perspective. I pulled some numbers this morning. March 31st of 2020, so this is just after COVID was getting going. We moved 9,600 passengers, customers. So on 2019, same day, 143,000. So I just need you to understand 143,000 to 9,000, and 2021, March 31, same number as 2020. So that is the gap in business that this organization has experienced. 73% decline in passenger volumes, an operating loss for 2020 of 3.8 billion compared with a 1.6 billion increase in 2019. We've raised $6.78 billion in cash in the market. And we are burning, and this is a public number, $15 to $17 million a day. We've laid off 20,000 people in 2020. These aren't just employees, these are our family and these are our friends. And that was an incredibly painful experience for the entire company. And we all work hard every day to bring as many of those people back into the fold. And so it's kind of important to give you those numbers, because in the middle of all that, We were repatriating Canadians back to the country when the government said you need to come home. We were moving PPE, which was critical for our frontline workers to stay safe. And we are now moving vaccines. So we are a critical industry to Canada. And I just think, that sort of backdrop, as I talk a little bit about the digital work and the tech work, is really, really important, because we are an industry in crisis. And a choice to continue to spend dollars on technology is not one that is being come to lightly. So when I arrived at Air Canada, the team had been doing an excellent job of supporting the whole reimagination of the company. We'd restructured our fleet, we restructured our product, we'd restructured our financials, our pension, our labor agreements, and now it was time to do tech. Super cool assignment, super cool assignment. So we began a 3-year journey and ambition that basically had us completely replumb all of the technology in the company, networks, security, storage, you name it. And we pulled out the most difficult system that an airline will ever do, the reservation and departure control system. So this is our cash register, our inventory, and how we move airplanes. And we did that in 2.5 years. We also launched a world-class loyalty program in November, and hopefully you've all joined it. It's a pretty exceptional program that's not just about the air travel, but about a whole pile of partnerships and bringing more Air Canada and more Canada into your lives. The really interesting part about this is that the reservation system cutover, which is done in 2 parts. We do sort of the cash register first, and then we do all of our airports. And at that point, we had hundreds of airports, and then you saw the volume starting to come down. I remember very vividly a discussion with our now retired CEO, Kelmer Minescu, just again, a huge impact in my career, someone I moved halfway across the country to learn from, where we said, okay, we're partway through, we've pulled service out of China, this pandemic is happening, this is a thing, and we still have to do all our airports. We have 2 choices. We can go, do it completely virtually, which has never been done before, or we can stop. Why we went is because A, the team was amazing. B, our vendors thought we were a little bit cuckoo, but the fact we were doing it. But the fact is that we couldn't launch our loyalty program if we didn't finish the reservations program. So it would have knocked everything to the right. And the momentum that we would have lost to stop and restart would have been substantial. So we're very, very proud that we are the first airline in the history of the galaxy to have completed a complete cutover virtually. And that is a huge nod to the creativity of the overall Air Canada team. These were our airport colleagues, these were our training colleagues. We went to online virtual learning, online support with vendors all around the world and stations all around the world, basically within hours. And that is a huge nod to the resiliency of this organization. So we've closed out our big 3-year plan, and our digital agenda has accelerated. It has not slowed down. And we work very, very closely with the WestJet group, as well as the large airports in Canada on a tech perspective right now, on how we're going to digitize some of the requirements for people to get back traveling. Think about this as proof you've done a test, proof you've got a vaccine. And that collaboration, to me, is one of the silver linings in some not so great stuff that's going on right now in our industry. And that acceleration of contactless travel in airports, and for Canadians to have a consistent approach no matter where or who they're traveling with, that's something that's really top of mind, with cost as an underlying driver. So that's kind of one theme. The other theme is we've just made a huge investment in technology, and now we are turning it the right way, which is basically, how do we impact the customer? How do we impact revenue? How do we impact being an efficient operation? Because we've challenged ourselves to say, we want to come through this, not a slightly different version of ourselves, but better and stronger and more resilient and really focus on customer experience and customer confidence. So I'll leave my comments there, but happy to dig into that one a little bit deeper if you'd like to.
Mm-hmm. This is very interesting indeed, and there are a couple of questions coming in that would like to sort of hear more about what you feel are those emerging technology trends that will be impacting transportation industry. Perhaps we believe that for the latter part when we are going to sort of address the questions from the audience. Catherine, you obviously have tech leadership experience that spans geographies, but also spans industries. And this is very interesting because I think that you are in a unique situation to comment. How has this role of a CIO, tech executive, evolved over the course of the last decade or more? What are your thoughts on the evolving role of Canada's tech leaders, Canada's tech executives?
Yeah, it's an excellent question and one that I really reflected on before we spent time here today, because I do think the role is really evolving. And, there's tech is at the core of everything now, and never has that become more obvious than right now. Where we don't have the tech, how things are very painful, and where we do have the tech, the ability to move quickly and be agile. So when I think about the emerging role of a tech leader, first of all, they need to be grounded in running a technically excellent shop. Like, that's table stakes. And so never ever should we ever lose sight of that. That our job is to run an essential service for organizations with that we work in, and ensure that we have safe, secure, and reliable operations. The cyber threat landscape is not becoming any friendlier. The systems environments are modernizing right now, but so we've got some in the old and some in the new, and that can be a little bit tricky, and particularly in cost-constrained environments. You really need to keep focused on making sure you got the basics right, because getting the basics right is what allows you to have the conversation and drive the strategy away that a CIO really should be. And when I think about one of the skills that I bring to our executive team, it's being able to really suss out the problems that we're trying to solve. Because oftentimes people will jump into, I think we need this and we need that tech, but really kind of backing people up and saying, what's the problem we're trying to solve? What information are we actually trying to get to when you're asking us to do this big data infrastructure? And what decisions are we going to make with those? And that requires a certain level of both very deep business domain knowledge, but also the ability to be curious and ask questions and listen versus talking. And so some of those softer skills as an executive, I do not get them wrong or get them right all the time. If there's any of my leaders on, they'd probably be giggling a little bit hearing me talk about this, but there are absolutely, it's a necessity to be able to build consensus, collaborate. But I'm going to sort of, the last pillar is, in my opinion, a good CIO knows when to move and when to make a decision and when to go, and is willing to assume some personal risk around that. And, when I think back on the last 3 years, it was there was some risk associated with cutting a brand new reservation system. Our loads were the highest that they'd ever been. We took some punches on that because we had implications in our contact centers. It's a brand new tool. People have been working on a tool for 25 plus years. And so there was external visibility on the fact that we had challenges, and having sort of the grit to drive that, while you're in it, having confidence that you'll come through the other side of it, and then having enough maturity to learn the lessons you need to learn when things don't go exactly as planned. But I talked to my team a little bit. We did a session the other day around burnout and mental health, and how do we take care of ourselves and how do we take care of our teams. That's an area that's incredibly important to me. And one of the biggest challenges is that people get into a cycle where they've got their anxiousness so high, they're concerned about making a decision, and we end up getting no movement. And I'd rather have an imperfect move that creates progress than perfect get in the way of progress. And I think technical leaders need to have some chops to be able to say, okay, we've had enough discussion, we've had enough collaboration, we have enough information, and now we go and we accept the fact it might not be perfect. So that's probably the basis, is get the hygiene right, be a collaborator, a strategist, and really listen, understand your business, and then be bold enough to move when it's time to move, and bring your team along with you.
This is excellent observation and advice. So what I'm getting from you, Catherine, here is that technology leader now really, the expectation is they are a business leader. Delivering technology is table stakes. Success is going to depend on the ability to actually be that business leader. Decisive, thoughtful, emotionally intelligent, articulate, business savvy. That's wonderful. So Catherine, then we also know, of course, that a lot depends on the team that's around you. At the senior executive levels, everything typically happens through others. When you look to assemble the team for you, your team, what are the typical skill sets or attributes that you look for in people that you hire?
Yeah, it's a really great question. I'm very fortunate. I've had teams that I've worked with over each of those mandates and assignment that have been outstanding, with some common themes. One is I really tend to appreciate where I've got some holes in my backyard, and I like to hire, particularly in the group that is very directly working with me, people that fill those holes. So I am not the deepest technical leader. I am not an architect by training. I am not a developer. I do not code. So I need to make sure I've got those type of technical experts on my team, and then, get out of their way and let them do what they're excellent at. I'm biased towards attitude and believe that you can absolutely train people about the industry, train people about the function, and that get it done attitude, there's always a way through it, are really, really important to me. And sort of the word is like genuine humans, like people that bring their very best to work. And, it's been an incredibly unusual year. I'm sure everyone is feeling it. We work and live in each other's homes right now. And never before have we seen genuine humans the way that we have. I have laughed with my team. I have cried with my team. I have done every emotion in between, and sometimes in one meeting. And the ability for people to show up in that way, creating that environment where they can bring their best self, in my opinion, you just get the best out of people when they feel safe and they feel confident that they can speak their mind. And, that would probably be the last thing. I know that's not easy for everyone, but I think that I'm certainly attracted to people within the group who are experts in their domain for sure, but those that, whether it's in an informal way, quietly, because that's the best way to do it, or it's in a group setting because they're a little bit more extroverted, but who will tell me their truth. Those are the people that really, really resonate with me. An executive doesn't need a group of people around them that are going to tell them what they want to hear. They need a group of people around them that will tell them what they need to hear, and they will keep telling them until they listen. And that is probably the most important attribute that, I both try to hire for, and then create the environment where that can really flourish. And it's important for you to have listening posts all over your organization to make sure that you're creating that safe environment for people to do that. Because my goodness, that has helped and served Air Canada in the last year, that we've had to pull on every string of knowledge from our team. And, for whatever it's worth, and I know there's a lot of technology leaders on the call today, the team that I have the privilege of supporting at Air Canada is truly extraordinary. And I shared some of the data at the front end. This is personal for us. This is personal for them. And we're on a mandate to rebuild a carrier that has the privilege of having the Canadian flag on its tail. And as a Canadian, which I'm incredibly proud of, anywhere in the world where I've had a chance to travel, and it's been far and wide, when I see that tail with the maple leaf, I don't care where I am, I'm home. And that means something to our team. And so people that can connect with the vision of what we are as an organization, that EQ side, as you said, is a really important side as well.
This was fantastic, Catherine. Thank you so much. What I took away is that, of course, you're leading a technology portfolio, but you're actually hiring for attitude. Yeah. And we are hearing this more and more, as we are clearly observing the trend that half-life of any skill is shortening year after year. And at the end of the day, this will actually all boil down to the attitudes and genuinity, authenticity of people.
Yeah, you bet. I think COVID, nothing else has made that clear to us, is that, life can be short, and it's important to kind of live your real life.
I love the fact that you are also mentioning the silver linings of this certainly tragic cause of this situation, and how it is actually helping in that establishment of that authentic relationship between humans who work together. As you're right, like we are now in each other's living rooms, and that actually creates an opportunity that was not present a year ago, when we were all sort of dressed up in business clothing and going to these special places where we work. So this is a very, very lovely to hear that from you. Thank you for that. You also mentioned how proud Canadian you are. I share that, as you can see my flags behind me. What are your thoughts on the importance of our business as technologists, on our sector, as a lever for our national growth and further sort of advancement and evolution of our society, of our economy? Any thoughts there? What is the role that technologists and technology sector plays?
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to, we're kind of at the core of everything. Never has that become more obvious. And, there's a couple of comments I'd like to make here. One is, I think that, for those that are students that might be on the line here, and I know we'll kind of get to this in a second, there is a lot of jobs in tech. Like, there is a huge vacuum of skills. And if you're thinking about, your career, and, even for those of you that are working and thinking of a career change, there is a enormous requirement for folks in Canada to show up with technical skills. And that doesn't need to just be, I'm a network engineer. There's a huge part around user experience and what that is. And that's, again, back more to maybe the art side of what I love about technology. One of the things the Canadian government did about 3 years ago, and I may be not exactly right in that timing, is they set up these superclusters. And specifically, there's one around a scale, which is supply chain and artificial intelligence. And there's a digital supercluster that's based out of BC. I'm fortunate that I got involved in that on the ground floor. And Scale AI is really intended to elevate the AI capability of Canada and build talent in Canada to have us be a global leader in this space. And I am incredibly encouraged by the amount of traction, even during COVID, that we've made in beginning to percolate some of these projects. Now, I think in Canada, the challenge is going to be, how do we scale that and keep them Canadian-based companies? Part of that means Canadian businesses need to buy from these Canadian technology organizations. So We've got to figure a way where it's difficult for these technology organizations in Canada to stay in Canada and build that skill set here if their only customers are outside of Canada, because Canadian organizations can't see their way to working with them. The other thing that I would also offer is that the ability to take the business demand or a problem and translate that into technology is a real, I think, continuing gap in technology. So, I often say to my team, like, the tech doesn't scare me, it's the humans that scare me. It's, the technology, we can always find our way through. It's the people that are using and have expectations around it that there's oftentimes a disconnect. And so, one of the earlier questions is, sort of what do you see in terms of trends? The way that we develop in the digital space is a great way for us to, do something quickly, go, is this it? No, not quite, tweak dial, versus these 2.5, 3-year massive monster projects that deliver an asset. And then all of a sudden you go, well, that's not exactly what we wanted. And you're like, oh no, we just spent, a lot of millions of dollars in 3 years. And what do you mean that's not exactly what you wanted? And then you have releases that happen after. So, from my point of view, we have work to do in Canada, both within government as well as in private sector, on how we really use technology to advance the Canadian economy. And I think, if you look at the dialogue that's going on around vaccine passports, yes, no, I mean, certainly that's top of mind in our industry. I think we need some continued strong technical leadership in both private and public, and those things need to kind of work together. And what I like about the Strategy Council is that it does bring together a collection of leaders from across many, many sectors. I think the more of that we can do, and the more learning we can do from one another, so 1 + 1 + 1 = 10, that's going to be part of the secret sauce to how do we use technology. We have an economy that needs restart here. There's certain sectors that are doing beautifully. There's other sectors, and we're probably a very good example, that are in crisis. We've been burnt to the ground, for lack of a better way of saying it. We are thinking about our technology investments very much in terms of how it can help expedite our restart. In a large part, using them as ways for customers to interact with us in a frictionless way. So I think some of those principles around how do we make it easier for Canadians to be Canadians and to get back to normal post-COVID, whatever that may look like, because I think we're forever changed after this. Technology, digital is going to be a foundational element. It's an incredibly cool time to be a tech leader in this country. Incredibly cool.
Fantastic, Catherine. Thank you for that. The last question that I do often, or should I say always ask our guests, is some advice to the students. We typically have a number of people who are, contemplating their careers right now. So what would be some of your advice to students in our audience?
First of all, for those that are students, thank you for joining us today. It's great to have students in the discussion. I think some of the things I've said already, this is a growing career path, and there is so many different rabbit trails you can go down. So don't think about going into tech as going into one stream and only being in one stream. There is a huge amount of learning that can go on in this arena. The other thing I would say is it's transportable. So I talked a little bit about my own career: telecom, airline, never again airline, energy, back to airline, because it was just such a great industry. I think the portability of the skills in this domain is massive. And I think the other thing is I'd offer is don't get too fixated on what job you start in. Or I've never been too concerned about what my job title is. I've been more concerned about what's the work And am I doing it with cool people? And am I doing it for a brand that I really believe in? Those are my big three items that I check through as I've been thinking about career changes. And, never, ever, ever stop learning and put yourself in an environment where you're always lifelong learner. I'm still learning things. I learned some things on a call this morning. And I think it is a little bit overwhelming. I don't think just for students right now. I just think for everybody right now. There's some research coming out around mental health showing that technology workers are one of the highest levels of anxiety and depression right now. That does not by any way diminish the pressure that our frontline workers in hospitals and doctors and nurses and care homes are feeling, but there's been a huge burden on technology people that we should pay attention to. And when I think about my job as a leader, I think I as often tell my team, be kind to yourself, take care of your mental health. Your mental health is health. As much as I say, what's the status of the project? So those would be a couple comments. Hopefully students and others find those helpful.
This is wonderful. Thank you very much. I'm now going to ask a couple of questions from the audience member that we've been receiving throughout this session. One interesting question about the innovation trends that you feel are most likely to make impact in the transportation sector. I'm going to assume with the view of post-COVID. Post-COVID reality whenever it is upon us. What might be your comment on those tech trends?
Yeah, it's a great question. As you can imagine right now, everyone's trying to help aviation. So there's lots of interesting options out there. But from my perspective, there's a couple of things. One, biometrics is not new, but we've not widely deployed that in Canadian environment. So we see that very much as a leading technology that's going to help us sort of in that end-to-end ability to move through the airport, because people are a lot more tuned to contactless kind of as we're rolling through COVID. Some of the things that we did early on to get into a contactless environment are sort of the prequels to a much larger contactless journey that we're contemplating for Canadian customers kind of right across the entire environment. Cloud, we are, up to our elbows in that. And what it allows for is ability for us to stand things up quickly, move quickly. But pay attention to in that world is you got to manage your costs, you got to manage your consumption. So we are super tuned to costs right now in our environment. The last one that I would, it's maybe not, so because AI has been around for a long time, but the whole hardening of the data AI practice area and the associated technologies that go along with that, that's going to be a big part of solving prediction problems in a more automated way, using and having good data to help us make decisions. If you think about kind of where we're at, we've dismantled an entire global network in the better part of 8 to 10 weeks at the front end of this. Now we go through rebuilding it, and none of the old models have any utility. And so we are rebuilding demand forecasting models, we're rebuilding fleet planning models. We have 200 aircraft sitting on the ground right now. So, those type of technologies that allow us to model out scenarios with our business teams, those are very much top of mind.
Wonderful. Another question asks, I'm going to translate a little bit, the balance between this modern digital technologies, your new booking system, your new loyalty program, with what the question supposes are still legacy operational backbones, if that's true. How do you view that? How do you balance that? What is, in other words, your view, perhaps, on the overall modernization of these legacy systems that I think most of your peers are struggling with these days.
Yeah, we all are. So, you know, I think this is the conundrum that we're all in. And the view is, how fast you move, how do you avoid lift and shift and into a modernized environment, and actually use a modernization as a way to sort of rethink how you do business. So, you know, I'll give you a very kind of simple example. When we put in our reservation system, we had about 150-ish systems that we needed to, you know, rewire it into. You know, we put in an integration layer as part of that. So that has made life a little bit of easier rolling forward for us. But some of those systems are very old still. Our reservation system was over 25 years old. Some of the systems it was connected to were also 25 years old and are still 25 years old. And so part of the you know, advice I would give to other technology leaders is the way you do it is, you know, rock solid enterprise architecture, and having that, the involvement of your architecture group to sort of have a long goal of how you want this to be built. Understanding it won't always go perfect as you start a modernization. You may need to throw some stuff out. You may need to back up a little bit. And you shouldn't be precious about that. You know, mistakes will be made when we're doing these big, large, complex projects and continuing down a path where, you know, you're like, this doesn't feel right. Usually just ends up in a solution that doesn't feel right, that you end up running for the next 10 years. So appreciating the fact as you go through these modernization activities, it's not always clean. And then just recognizing the fact, particularly in a cost-constrained environment, that some of these old systems serve their purpose, and you don't need to be in a big hurry to modernize them. It's good enough. And unless they're secret sauce or they're, you know, strategically important, you know, not getting so fixated on being able to go, ta-da, we have a completely modernized environment. You need to modernize where it makes sense. You need to invest in modernization where it makes sense. And you also need to, kind of no different than air traffic control, you need to slot things, because the change fatigue that happens in an organization when you're constantly doing massive transformation is real. Humans get tired when you're changing out what they're doing all the time, particularly, you know, in 2019 when we're running at full capacity, or 2021 when we're trying to rebuild an organization. You need to be sensitive to the organization's capacity to absorb change. And in fact, as we look at our ops modernization, which is our whole sort of back-end suite that takes care of all of our operations, we are approaching it in a modular fashion. We're not going to do big bang. We're going to do components of it. But part of the enterprise architecture view that we took while we did the prior 3 years has given us the platform to be able to do a more staged modernization and ops that we didn't have before. So I would consider that the organization now has all the plumbing, the foundation, and the electrical work done. And now we can decide kind of, we're going to finish this room first and that room next. And we're going to, you know, maybe plant some flowers outside to make it look nice. That sort of approach around what is the mission critical business driver. Also appreciating that our job as technology leaders is that sometimes old stuff just needs to be replaced. It's a technical risk to the organization, and you need to have enough chops, again, for lack of a better word, to say, I know the company doesn't want to do it, but they have to. This is a risk that we're not willing to assume. And so it's that balance between all those things. The reality is, I think we're going to be running in a hybrid old new environment for many years to come.
Oh, yeah. Yes. And I love you mentioned this a couple of times, the versions of, you know, perfect is the enemy of good.
Yeah.
So let's be good. And sometimes the pace needs to actually be properly paced to allow people to go through these changes. These are, I think, very, 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 very good, real sound advices. Catherine, we had a number of other questions, but unfortunately we are at time, and I want to certainly be respectful of your time. I want to thank you very much again. This was a wonderful conversation. Thank you for spending time with us and for sharing your thoughts. And to our audience members, as always, thank you very much for finding the time in your calendars to dial in and be here with us. I would like to again thank CIO Strategy Council for co-organizing this with us at Deloitte, and to remind you all that 2 weeks from now, on April the 14th, we're going to have another very, very interesting guest CIO from a very, very interesting industry. Chris Foster, who is the CIO of TC Energy, is going to be dialing in from Calgary to share his thoughts and some of his lessons. So please do join us again 2 weeks from now. And with that, Catherine, thank you very much again, and have yourself a lovely Wednesday.
Thank you. You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.